Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you, Allie?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Kat, how are you doing?
Doing well.
Do you prefer Kat, Kate, or Catherine? Because I've called you all three.
I usually go by Kate.
Okay, Kate.
Usually,
Kate
but
it is.
yeah. When I was younger, I thought Kat was so cute, so I kind of enjoy being called Kat. But I usually go by Kate.
Okay, Kate it is. I think that's hard too when you have pen names and you're, what are we supposed to call you? So
Yes.
that's good. Thank you for clarifying. We want to say good morning to Morningstar, one of our regular watchers. Thank you for being here. And she's looking at Fictionary while waiting for us to go live. I hope that was a good checking out of Fictionary. That's awesome. We're excited to have with us today Katharine Sadler, who has a few pen names. I'm sure we'll get to those, a couple pen names. We'll get to those. But she is a fantasy author, romance author, and we're excited to chat with her today about all things writing, a little bit of marketing. If you haven't seen her website, go to katharinesadler.com. You'll see she has both of her writing genres broken out on different pages between fantasy and romance. And thank you for being here today and for sharing your time with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I think obviously always the best place to start is to tell us your writing journey up until this point, because I think you've had a really long career so far.
Well, I've always, for as long as I can remember, wanted to be a writer, and I've always wanted to be a published writer. And so I started out wanting to publish traditionally. Spent a long time. I think back in the early 2000s, the idea was that you had to be published. You had to have credits to your name. So I spent a long time writing short stories and trying to get published in a journal somewhere, right? Because that's what you needed to do, when what I really wanted to write was novels, and that's what I've always wanted to write. So it's been kind of a circuitous path to get here. And it wasn't until I met my husband and he really started, and that was around the time that I would say we got together in 2003. So it was some years before self-publishing really became a big thing. And once self-publishing became a thing, he kind of said, why are you taking all this time and doing all this stuff to try to prove yourself to people when you can just go out and do it? But I had it so stuck in my mind that traditional publishing was the only way to go, that it took me a really long time to get to the point where he was. And what really cinched it for me to decide to go the self-publishing route was I really believed if I got with a publisher, I would have an editor, right? My books would be edited and I would have someone to support me and guide me through the process. And I was reading a book by a very well-known agent, Donald Moss, from the Donald Moss Agency. And he actually said most publishing companies don't edit anymore. That if you want your work edited, you should have an agent who edits you. So it's, if you're lucky enough to get that agent who edits your work. And for me, that was the moment I said, all right, I'm done. I'm done sending out queries. I'm done trying to shape myself. It's such a difficult path to traditional publishing. And started there and just really focused on writing books. And my husband's theory has always been it's easier to sell multiple books than one book. And so that's what, for me, that worked really well because when my kids were young, and wrote the books I wanted to write, which I think is the best part about self-publishing.
Yeah.
And there's not, with self-publishing, there's not that pressure. I think if you're traditionally published, there's that pressure for your book to do really well out of the gate. And with self-publishing, you're creating a product that is there and is marketable forever, really. And it gave me the leeway I needed at that time. So
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, how did you end up deciding you're going to write fantasy? Because I think you started in fantasy before romance.
I did. So I was a terrible book snob for a long time. I went to university. I studied English literature. That was my major. And I believed for a long time that I was going to write literature before I realized that that wasn't even really what I enjoyed reading. I loved reading urban fantasy. I'd grown up reading Anne McCaffrey and Frank Herbert, and just really was really drawn to that genre of urban fantasy. So that's where I started. And as I said, I was a book snob. I'd never really read romance. I'd been brainwashed by this idea that's out there that romance is somehow a lesser genre, which I think is ridiculous. And I was working on an urban fantasy book, and I wanted to have a love interest in that book. And I said, I don't really know how to do this. I've read lots of books that have romance in them, but when it comes to writing it, I was really struggling. So I attended a book fair, and they were having a talk about romance and how to write romance. And so I decided to download onto my Kindle a sample from one of the featured authors, Virginia Cantrell. And I was immediately hooked. I read the sample, I downloaded the book, I read the whole thing in a day. And that was it. I loved romance, and that's where I started shifting from fantasy to contemporary romance.
And how many fantasy had you written by that point that you were making the shift to romance?
Let's see. Probably I'd written 8, maybe 10 of the fantasy books by the time I made that shift.
I have to say, I love you have the Fairy Files fantasy books. I would read them just because they look so darn cute. And you have 6 of them, and I love the titles. And I wanted to talk about, first of all, does the title come to you before the story, or as you're ideating the story, does the title just materialize, or do you have to think really hard on the titles and they come together at the end? Because here's the titles, and I love them. Fairy on the Rocks, Pink Princess Fairy Teeny. I think that's my favorite. Fairy with a Twist, Wild Fairy Moonshine, Bloody Fairy, and Fairy Meat. And so clearly there's like a drinking theme going on in there. And I mean, your titles are just really, really outstanding. I just wondered about that as I was going through your list of books.
I really struggle with titles, actually. The main character of the Fairy File series owns a martini bar. And so that's where the titles being sort of drink names came from. But I have a really good friend who beta reads everything for me. And she and I will brainstorm about titles sometimes. And she actually came up with the Fairy Files being the name of the series.
I think that's fantastic. So you draw on anyone you can to get inspiration to help you. Yeah. I've started keeping a notebook of when I think of these zingers that are sure going to be the best titles ever, just to remind myself in the future. But I do think your titles are great. So you have 25 books. You have quite the list now. And you said that you're hoping to start, or you are moving into more marketing. I know I'm on your email list. I've been getting your newsletters and things like that. So I know you're doing the marketing thing. You're really rolling it out. But let's go back to the writing and how you transition from, as you were saying, trying to be more of a literary writer and with your English degree and trying to move into, writing fantasy. And how did you set up your, like your systems for writing? How did you I feel like just now I'm finally in this groove of, how I'm going to write and the time I'm spending on it and kind of getting used to my own way of writing. I mean, how did you transition, as you became a newbie author, I guess what I'm saying?
It's actually changed a lot over the years. For me, writing is always something I've done. It's always something I've made time for. But I actually found when I had children that I became much better at structuring my time and saying, okay, I'm going to get this much done every day. And that helped me. But when I started out, I was definitely more of a pantser. When I came through, and I don't know if this is true anymore, But when I came through, I took a lot of creative writing classes. I went to creative writing summer camp. I did a lot of critique groups. And the philosophy, the way that we as students were taught was read lots of books, you know? And there was this idea that craft books were something that you only read if you were a hack, right? Like if you are going to be an artist, you don't need to read a craft book. And which I think is ridiculous, because if you're in art class, you're taught techniques. You're not just told, go read this book and you'll absorb the magic. And so actually reading craft books helped me name what I was intuiting, right? So put a name to this feeling. And then when you can name it and you can say, this scene isn't working. Oh, I'm missing that arc, right? Like it helps so much, and it clarifies everything. And through the process, I learned that being a plotter makes for a much cleaner first draft. And then that's a lot easier to edit. So it was definitely a progression and something that I learned over time, reading a lot of books and just a lot of trial and error. I learned from trial and error, unfortunately. I'm not good at believing something somebody else tells me and learning that way always.
Yeah. So nowadays, you would say you plot more than you pants. Do you plot the entire book and stick to it, or do you plot some and change it as something pops in your head along the way?
I plot and I do character sketches, and I actually intend to do even more of that going forward, but I rarely stick to it. So I have a general idea of what's going to happen, but sometimes my characters don't agree. And by the end, it looks very different from what I think the basic structure is the same. Yeah. But a lot has changed by the time I get to the end.
So how much time do you think you spend on the plotting? And once you get the idea, how much time are you spending on plotting and charactering and really, building out essentially this world of, what you're about to write before you sit down to actually write the words?
I actually, like right now, I'm working on editing a book that I wrote 3 or 4 months ago. And I've got ideas right now for 3 books, the next 3 books I'm going to write. And so it's marinating. Those ideas marinate for a long time, and I'm scribbling notes and shaping, getting an idea of what I want the story to be and what I want the characters to be for a long time before I even sit down and start that. First, the plotting. And I'm very impatient. I am not a patient person. So I think I rush. I rush through the character sketches and I rush through the plotting. So it usually probably just takes a few days at the most, because I really want to start writing. But I'm gonna learn to be disciplined. That's my plan for my next book. And I really think I want to take a week, and really flesh out my characters and have the character write a letter or create just a scene of dialogue from one character and get a really good grasp on my characters and my story before I even start.
I feel like I'm looking in a mirror. So I'm like, that's how I feel too. I feel like I should take more time, and I want to, and I start to, and no matter how much I do plot things out, or I, outline, or at least have an idea of what I want to see where, or scenes, but I always go off track. How about you, Allie? Or how are you when it comes to plotting and pantsing?
Well, I mean, I got 17,000 words into my novel and went back and wrote a prequel because I needed to know how that had happened, and that idea came to mind. But I was just wondering, Kate, why are you feeling like you need to do the more plotting?
Because I do feel sometimes I get into the story before I have a good grasp of the character. For me, I think that's the biggest thing, is that I don't feel like I have the best grasp of the character. But also, I wrote a book a few months ago that I already know I'm going to have to totally rewrite because I did not plot it well enough, and it just doesn't work. Okay. Maybe that wouldn't have been fixed by better plotting. Maybe it just needs to go through several rewritings. But just having had to rewrite a few books recently, I feel like I probably need to plot better.
Okay.
Morningstar is asking, what format do you use to plot? Journal, Scrivener, etc.
I use Scrivener. So Scrivener has the, you can create your scenes and your chapters ahead of time, and then they have note cards. You can have an image of note cards, and you can kind of like lay everything out. Before I had Scrivener, I actually took index cards, and each index card was a scene, and I would lay them out on the table.
Yeah. When you're talking about plotting and you want to kind of outline and plot more before you jump in, do you mean every single detail, exact scenes, or do you mean kind of at least a direction from chapter 1 to the end, and you'll figure it out as you go? Like how much are you talking about detailed plotting?
I do each scene, but I do a very general description of what I want each scene to be. And as I get closer to the end, it's more vague, right? So I don't really have every scene all the way to the end figured out, but I at least try to have the first through the middle pretty well figured out.
Yeah. So just give you some leeway to, let your characters run amok a little once you get into it.
I know recently you also saw the Enneagram talk with Alessandra Torres, the Anchors Mini-Con. That was like a light bulb moment for me, because I think if you figure out who your characters are and what their biggest conflict is and what their biggest tension is, that can really figure out your whole plot for you right there. Yeah. And that actually solved an issue I had with one of my books, to create conflict that actually hits at their personality, their weaknesses.
Yeah. After looking at the Enneagrams, I also looked a lot for the characters I was writing at that moment at the horoscopes. Because I think that's a very similar concept too. You're going to find the yin to the yang. So which people get along the best, and then which people are the ones that, will probably have a lot of friction and not get along well and whatnot. And but just getting to know their personalities through Enneagram or through horoscopes or through whatever you're going to look at, I think there's definitely, it's so reflective of reality that when we write, I think it's a good exercise to go through for sure. I know Allie believes you're a what? You're an I... What are you?
Oh, INFJ.
INFJ, yeah.
That's
go ahead.
That's the Myers-Briggs one.
Yes.
That's Myers-Briggs. Have you ever done the Enneagram though, Allie?
I have. It was a few years ago, and it I wasn't as convinced by its accuracy as I was with the Myers-Briggs one. When I did it, I can't remember what I came up as though in the end. But I know with the Myers-Briggs, I'm like right down the middle on most of them. So I think I'm just not enough to be clear on what I am.
Way or not, yeah.
How
about Kate? How about Kath? How about Kate? Do you know your Enneagram? Had you gone through and done it on your own then?
My Enneagram is 1, which really surprised me. I'm an INFJ also, but I'm not a big attention to detail person, but I am a list person, which I guess 1s are very structured, organized. But the motivation is the most important for the Enneagram, right? And the motivation for a 1 is to be right, like morally right. And I definitely think that probably is right on the cat for me. That's right.
Does it come through in your writing, do you think, that you tend to make your characters morally just and morally right?
I think actually it's a problem, because I think characters are more interesting when they are not always doing the right thing.
Yeah. Or characters who are not like, I don't want to create characters that are me in that character, try to bring myself out of that and focus on this character. Okay, this character is going to be a 7, what would that be like? That kind of thing. So yeah, I think that was a really good exercise to go through with the Enneagram for sure. Whether or not I would apply it every time, I'm not sure. But at the time when I was looking at the stuff from Alessandra, I was writing exactly the I forget what numbers they were in their example, but that's exactly who I was writing. It shed so much light on what I was writing. I was like, oh my gosh. And I could see myself writing that combination of numbers in a couple forever in every book, but that would get boring. So I gotta not do that. Yeah, I think you've got to make it really, more well-rounded characters in every book that aren't the same. My mom and my aunt constantly talk about they feel like, some romance writers that they've read for a long time will have like this formula all of a sudden, and they'll get tired of reading them because it's like they're not coming up with anything unique or interesting. And so I wonder, how do we keep things fresh?
I wonder if that might be something that the traditional publishing companies, push onto them as much as it's something they choose to do. Yeah. We've got, this is selling, so let's just keep doing the same thing sort of mentality.
Yeah. Morningstar says, I'm not devious. I've had a hard time writing people who plot evil.
Yes, exactly.
It depends the kind of evil, doesn't it? Like, some people do evil but think they're doing great things and justify what they're doing. Some people happily do evil because they just don't care. Some people plot and are really devious and treacherous, and those people write with Morningstar. I do not get those people at all.
She also says, do you get more joy out of characters that have similar traits or characters who are very different from you?
I don't know. I really have to think about that question. That's a tough question because I get excited about characters, but I don't take the time to introspectively question how much they're like me. But I think probably more characters who are different than me. I think they're the most fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's probably like actresses where they're just sweet as pie in real life, but then they get to play these real bitches in their characters, and they're having they have a lot of fun, being that character that they wouldn't really be in real life. So I guess in that respect, it's a lot of the same. I also love your covers, and I wondered if you use a cover artist, the same one for all of your covers, or in fact, I'll pull it up here while you're talking.
Thank you. I do use the same cover artist for all my covers. She has a site, Cover Your Dreams Designs, where she sells pre-made covers, and she'll do custom covers as well. She's a wonderful cover artist.
Was it hard for you to find her? Find one that you...
It was well, not really, honestly, no, because I had started out with another site that I wasn't happy with. And I think I just went to one of those great sites that are out there that recommend freelancers for indie authors. And I think she was the first one I found that I said, I really like her stuff, and it just worked. So got really lucky there.
Yeah, for sure. I want to bring up a couple of your covers to show people in case they haven't seen. So we'll do this here. There we go. These were great. And so in your fantasy, I also loved recently, I called it your furry series, but I don't think you're calling it that. The Wolves of Mule Creek, I didn't realize is what they were called.
I love that furry series. That would be good.
I think I got it from Fighting Fear.
Yes.
Fighting Furry. Yeah. And this is the one that you have the Yeti story in.
But in the newsletter, the Yeti is from the Fairy File series.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I thought it was from your, I don't know, I was putting together furry and Yeti, I guess. I don't know. So is that coming out soon, or which one is that? The Yeti one.
So the Yeti is just a short story I decided to do for the newsletter. It involves the characters from the Fairy File series, but it's not in any of the books. It's just strictly for the newsletter.
Oh, I got it. Okay. Are you thinking that might become like a lead magnet at some point?
It might. Yeah. I think that would be a good idea for it.
Because it reads really well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got that. Let's switch gears and talk about your romance now. So Are you going to continue writing fantasy, or which, you are writing this lead magnet, but are you focused more on romance now? What is your...
I'm focused more on romance, but I'm going to continue writing urban fantasy. I've got an idea for a spin-off series from the Fairy Files series. So I will continue doing that, but I just love writing romance.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, your Catalpa Creek series, I think you actually have 5 out, right? And you're working on the 6th book now? Or
I have four out, and I'm working on the 5th one right now.
5th one. Okay. So, of this series, this is one I think that you were probably referring to in our group, which is where you really needed to have the Bible to remind yourself who the characters were and all of that. So, tell us more about developing a series, especially when it gets beyond 3 books. I mean, that is a little bit more to start managing. So tell us about how you manage that.
Not very well. So I'm going to that's another thing I'm going to have to do better. So I create character sketches for each of my main characters. But there's so many little details you don't realize you're going to need going forward until you're actually writing that next book. And then you say, what was that street name? Or did I name that street? What's the name of the high school in the town? All these things that just kind of pile up over 5 books, and it's a lot to go back through and try to find it.
Yeah.
So I'm working on creating a spreadsheet, and as I write, filling that up. And I would really recommend doing that from book 1, which I did not do.
Now, did you plan the Catalpa Creek series as, going on so long into 5 books, or?
Yes.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay. So you planned it from the get-go.
Yeah. See, that's why I think that me being a 1 doesn't really fit, because the organization is not my strong suit. I just kind of say, I want to do this. It'll be fun, and let's go do it.
So you're a 1 with a wild streak who's a little bit not adverse to risk.
Yes.
That makes total sense. I'm risk adverse as well. I kind of jump in. but yes, I are you planning a 6th one as well, or is this going to stop at 5?
No. So there's 7 siblings in the family, right? No, 6 siblings in the family. 6. But one of the books is not about one of the siblings, so there will be 7. 7 for sure.
Wow. That's great. Okay, so I know we've had some conversations about covers, and these covers you had to redo because if you want to market them on Amazon, apparently showing them kissing is not, accepted and that kind of thing. So have you been working on new covers for this? Yeah, Allie, yeah, they're really particular. They're particular
That's
about...
like the romance thing.
Yeah, kissing, you would think. They talk about not being naked as well, or if there's an appearance of being naked. You can't show guys' nipples if you want to do an Amazon ad. So talk about your journey.
Oh, is that just for ads?
For ads, yes.
Okay.
Just for ads.
Which is why, Allie, whenever I see a cover that's really salacious, I'm like, well, they're not doing ads, but somehow they're selling. And I guess you're either selling because you've got that kind of cover, or you're selling because you're doing ads. I don't know. Anyway, Kate, tell us about your journey with that.
Well, I actually managed to get away with doing an ad for the first book a couple times, but then I think the 3rd time I tried to do an ad, they nixed it. And apparently if you continue to try after they've said no, they can, I guess, ban you from ads for a little while. So I'm going to have to redo, I'm just going to redo all the covers for the series, but that's not something I've started working on yet because that's going to be a big expense. So probably in May, we'll look at doing that.
And they were so cute too, your covers.
I love them.
So, I know.
Yeah.
But I wonder, I mean, you'll find a way your cover artist will find a way to make it consistent across the series, especially when you've got all 7. Now, are you planning to do a marketing push once all 7 are done, or will you start dripping these out at some point? Like, I know you have been, but I mean like a real marketing, like relaunch kind of a thing,
What I don't know if I'll do a true relaunch. What I'm planning to do is when the 5th book comes out, I'll do a big series promotion where book 1's free and the other books in the series are less. And then on top of that, I think probably do a blog tour for the new book and just kind of really put it out there.
Mm-hmm. Have you done a blog tour before?
I'm doing my first one next month.
Oh, so did you set that up yourself or hire someone, or just how did you make this happen? Tell us all about it.
I am doing it through a blog tour company, Espresso Book Tours. So in the past, I've done the whole query to all the different bloggers to try to get reviews. And that has just been a very difficult process, and I've managed to gain very little from it. So having someone who has those connections to the bloggers makes a huge difference.
So you're paying Espresso Tours to help you with that. Was that pricey, or?
I don't think so. No, I don't think
getting
so.
Out of it. How many blogs are they connecting you with?
So it's going to be, the tour is going to last 5 days, and there's going to be 16 blogs.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are you live on those, or are you writing? Are they writing, interviewing you and doing a write-up on it? What do those look
So
like?
each one will be doing something. Several of them will be reviewing the book, and then I'll be doing guest posts on some, and there'll be interviews on some. I won't be live on any of them.
Are you excited?
I'm very excited.
Do you already have the ones that you have to write something for? Is like everything all done and ready to go?
No.
So that's a bit of work.
Yeah. We'll see.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. I'm excited to see all that come together for you. So that's Catalpa Creek. And then you also moved on with Vegas Billionaires, which I'm excited about. So I've read a couple of your Catalpas. I've read both of your Billionaires. There's How to Lasso, and you've got another one coming out. What's the news on that one?
That one is actually the book that the blog tour will be for. And so that one's coming out April 16th. That one's How to Nail a Stud. And excited about it.
Yeah, I'm excited for it too. When you do the blog tour for that, then it will mention that you have other stuff, I guess, and lead people to your other work. And
yeah, hopefully.
And the website, yeah. Are you having them promoting like a pre-order on your blog tour of the How to Nail a Stud, or what is the promote or the call to action that they're asking for?
It's promoting the new release.
Okay.
So it'll
as an actual purchase or download, not as a pre-order.
Right.
Okay. Cool. Very cool. And then your remixed fairy tale series. I actually have Remington's Tower in my Kindle and haven't gotten it to it yet. But this is more of a new adult. And so let's talk for a moment about new adult, because it is a rather new, in the last probably 4 or 5 years, right? Subgenre. So how did you differentiate your new adult from the rest of your more steamy romance?
Well, when I wrote these, I think new adult was really big, and I was really excited about new adult. I think new adult books actually are very steamy. The ones that I was reading at the time were, and so differentiated really more about, for me, it was the age. So they're college students, and these were the first romances I did. This was actually supposed to be a much longer series, which I might return to it at some point, but it seemed like I started to do this, and then new adult kind of sank in popularity. Mm-hmm. And also the whole idea of doing fairy tales apparently is not very popular. So I've just kind of set it aside for now. I got interested in doing other things. So, but I do want to come back to and refresh the covers. And
yeah, I was looking at the covers. You did have like a little bit of a cover change between this last one. I like the first two. Were you trying to just kind of attract
I was trying to be more in the genre, match the genre. Mm-hmm. So probably maybe just redo that third cover and think about doing some more books in that series. As I said, I do trial and error. Everything is let's see how it goes.
Yeah, for sure. I wonder if you could just rebrand these instead of new adult, but contemporary romance, because I think a lot of contemporary romance, there are a lot of fairy tale redoing, fairy tale retelling.
That's true.
Yeah.
I love fairy tale retellings.
Yeah. Morningstar wants to know, as of right now, which book is your favorite?
My favorite is actually the book that I'm editing right now. It's the first time it's happened to me. I've loved all my books, but I just have fallen in love with this book, which is not the best thing because it blinds me to its faults.
So which book is that? Is that The Billionaire?
The Poet in the RV.
Oh, yes, I
Catalpa
read that
Creek
one.
book. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I read that for you as a beta, which I love it too. I love the characters. I love him.
Thank you.
I love the book boyfriend. I'm excited to see that one come out. And that is in the Catalpa Creek series, would be your number 5. Yeah. I loved beta reading that. I thought The Deadbeat Next Door was really good. The Workaholic, I'm about halfway through. I really like it as well. These are all really, really sweet characters that I just, they're so well written. I really appreciate your writing because you really bring those characters to life for me. And so I don't think it's easy to do in romance these days. And I tend to write like just 12 chapters of romance, and you've got longer. And I think you do a really good job, in creating the characterizations. But I liked The Poet in the RV as well. So I can't wait to see how you improve it and why it's your favorite. I'm looking forward to it. So how hard has it been to find beta readers and to find ARC people? I mean, what's your journey been like there for the last few years?
I have to say that the indie community is amazing. And once I came out of my writing cave and I started doing a better job with connecting with other writers, it really has not been difficult to find beta readers. Prior to that, it was really, I have a friend who is not afraid to tell me exactly what she thinks, and she's a wonderful beta reader. And I've had a couple of other friends who've been willing to read for me, but it's so helpful to have people who are in the indie community and who are also writing to beta read for you. They have such great insight, and there's so much we can learn from each other. It's been really fantastic.
Yeah, I've heard it both ways, that when you have beta readers, get the people who are actually reading the genre, not so much writers, but then I think so many of us writers in romance are also reading romance. And so we're kind of, able to look at it from both ways, from both the reading perspective and what we enjoy reading, and from the craft perspective, perhaps, So I don't know what you prefer, but it sounds like most of your beta readers are in the industry.
Right now, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So how about your editing process? What is I know we kind of touched on it in our group, but go over kind of your editing process. What do you tend to do in that? You had a system you mentioned.
Sure. When I have finished writing a book, I set it aside and I don't touch it for at least 6 weeks. Usually I go and I write the next book. And so when I come back to it, I try to come back to it like I don't remember anything I wrote, and I'm totally fresh eyes on it, and I read it like I'm a reader. So I try to read it in 1 or 2 days. And just looking for, does this flow? Does this work? Where am I bored? What's the major structural issues to this book? And that's really where I start. So I go through and I fix all the major stuff that I know is bad. And then I go each time you're kind of like your comb is getting finer and finer as you're going through and finding the mistakes. And when I'm pretty happy with it, then I give it to beta readers. And then I find all new things that need to be fixed and go start the process again, go through it. And then once I'm happy with it, I publish it.
So you don't use, and we just found this out from you recently, you don't use an outside editor because you've, really honed, I guess after 25 books, you probably do really hone your own editing and own it. And as long as you're getting that good beta reading feedback, then you feel like you're able to you actually proofread yourself everything. You do it all on your own.
I do. Someday, eventually, I'd like to have a proofreader, even hire a copy editor, possibly. But right now, I do it all myself.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So.
Do you order the author's proof paperback to read through when you're proofreading, or what's your proofreading system? Or do you stick to the computer screen?
I stare at the computer screen. So I recently saw someone said you can download it onto your Kindle, which is a really good idea because then you're really getting the experience as a reader. So I might try that.
You see so many more typos that way. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I bet.
Yeah, I watched Bethany at Zeta, and she recently showed how she proofread in using the author's proof in the paperback, and I thought that's cool because you probably see things the reader would see then and try to catch it. So she marked up every page, read every page, and then highlighted in yellow when she went through and fixed them, so she knew where she was at in fixing them. But I also wondered, it looked like she formatted the book and then proofread. So I don't know why, that just kind of threw me for a loop. I thought you'd have everything perfect before you format it, but I guess not.
The traditional proofreading you do after you've got it formatted, because you're actually looking in traditional proofreading, you're looking for where all the words are on the page. You're not looking for those last typos and the other stuff, because the copy editor should have caught 98% of that.
Yeah.
So you're looking for making sure there's not a page with just one word on it and things like that. It's a typesetting proofreading type thing.
Oh, that's so great. I'm so glad I learned that, because I would have done something, completely wrong. Not that there's a wrong way or right way, but
that's not how it's done generally in the indie at the moment. Proofreading is done before formatting, not after, in general.
But you think it should be the other way for sure. And I see the value of seeing it the way a reader is seeing it and catching. I think for me, something you touched on too, Kate, was as you're reading through a book, I just don't see it anymore. Like my eyes are blinded. And so I think seeing it in that hard format would be better for me.
Do you ever read it out loud or get Word to read it out loud to you?
No, but I'm going to try that now that I'm in this editing mode. I really think I should.
I read it out loud. I haven't had Word read it to me. I read it out loud.
Do you record it, Kate, or do you just read it out loud?
I just read it out loud.
Okay.
You got to try getting Word to read it to you. Sometimes I don't know if it's as funny in American as it is in British, but I tell you the beautiful diction of the British man who reads my Word, especially in swearing scenes and steamy sex scenes, is just the funniest thing.
I was afraid it might be robotic sounding, so that it would.
It is. It's hilarious. The last edit I did for someone else was a sci-fi, and it included an AI type character, and the voice just kind of went perfectly with that. It was beautiful.
Kate, you actually did an audiobook or two. How many didn't you? And how many?
I've done one.
Which one did you do?
The Fairy on the Rocks.
Yeah. And how did that go? How was that process, and what did you use? I assume you used Audible probably at the time, or ACX?
Yes, I used Audible ACX. So I didn't pay anything up front. I put my book out there, and then I waited to see narrators who were interested in reading the book, and chose one. And she and I split any of the proceeds from the sales.
How was that process? Do you think that A, was it worth it, and B, was it pretty easy to put in place? Would you do it again?
I will do it again someday. It was a lot more time consuming than I anticipated, because I have to listen to everything that she produces, and then if there's anything that that isn't working for me, then she redoes it, and then I listen to it again. It's a very time-consuming process.
Oh wow,
And
I wasn't thinking about the production, like how involved an author had to be. That's interesting.
Yeah, so I do think it's worth it. I always think it's nice to have as many versions of your work out as you can, but all of it's time. It's all time. That's the hard part, right?
Yeah, especially with 25 books.
Yes.
How about other languages? Have you done anything with translation?
I haven't ventured into any of that yet. No.
Now, all of your books are on Amazon or wide? What are you published on?
All of my books are on Amazon except for the remixed fairy tales. Those I still have wide. And I'm probably only leaving them wide because I finally got the first one perma-free on Amazon. And it's perma-free because it's free wide. So if I were to move it to back to Amazon only, I'd probably have to price it. And I like it being free right now. But for me, having everything on Amazon works the best right now.
Yeah. Are you on anything like Amazon UK as well? Like when you list on Amazon, are you only doing the US or are you doing the UK, Canada, Australia, as many as you can?
When you list on Amazon, you're everywhere.
Okay.
Your ebook will be available everywhere.
What about paperback? Are you doing anything with that?
I do have some of my books in paperback. I don't really sell any, not very many. We did it more of we wanted to be able to have a physical copy of the book to put on our shelf at home. But the process, I know it's changed now because the last time I did one, it was CreateSpace. And my husband and I do it together because he's the very meticulous, detail-oriented person, and it takes us all day to format for paperback. And by the end of the day, I don't like him very much. So, because I'm the person who says, that looks good, let's move on. And he's like, wait, no, that's crooked. And, and we have to sit there for another 20 minutes. So we don't do it very often anymore.
How sounds like your husband's really involved, or at least gives you some really good feedback. Sounds like he was great with you with marketing and things like that. So is he in this industry, or does he just have a great interest in his wife's career?
He has a great interest in my career. He's incredibly supportive. He's in the IT industry. So he's more of the technical side of things. He has read one of my short stories that I'd written when we were first dating. He's never read anything else.
I had to force my husband to listen to me read him one of my stories on the way to Costco because it was an hour drive away one night. So otherwise he wouldn't, he's the same way. I don't read. Well, A, he never has time to read. So B, if he's going to read, it's not going to be romance. So that's funny. But
my husband doesn't read fiction. He reads, but he doesn't read fiction. And when he read that short story, he got really annoyed because my main character was kind of a profligate kid. And he's like, why is that kid not doing the right thing? Well, because that's his character. But that's so stupid. Why would he do that? He doesn't really understand creating a character to make the story interesting.
My Morningstar says my husband read a short story. Now I read to him. I have to practically tie him down but he'll listen. And he actually gave me really good advice, a suggestion. And so he was listening. But yeah, that's funny.
That's good.
Okay, so you have quite the backlist, and the books are enjoyable, and I love them. I've enjoyed reading them, and so now. What's ahead of you? I mean, you're saying, I've heard you say this a few times, that now you're just trying to get into marketing more and that kind of thing. So do you have a plan? Do you have a marketing plan? What are you thinking about doing moving forward?
I still want to keep putting out more books. The past year or two, I've slowed down on putting out books. And I want to get back into putting out.
How many have you put out the last couple of years, and what's your comfort level with what you can produce?
I'd like to put out 4 or 5 books a year. I feel like I can do that. In the past couple of years, I just had a couple books that were really difficult and took me a long time to get the way I wanted them. I'm not happy about that. So I want to get back to 4 or 5 books a year. That's my main priority. And the marketing is just going to come slowly. I'm not very excited about social media. I have a really hard time doing anything on social media. So more about promos, blog tours, building a newsletter list, improving my newsletter, putting it out once a month rather than just when I had a new release or something going on, cover reveal. And really just trying to go slowly until it starts earning more money, and then using that money to build up on it. Mm-hmm. So, and then figuring out social media and, figuring out one thing at a time. So right now I'm figuring out AMS ads. And then once I've got that figured out, then maybe I'll figure out Facebook ads. And maybe at some point I'll figure out social media. But kind of figuring out that side of things slowly, because where I want my focus to be is writing the books.
Sure. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, with a bigger backlist, which you already have, but even greater, I mean, that gives you more marketing, and hopefully people enjoy your writing and your stories, so they'll want to keep checking out everything else that you've written. How many people do you have on your email list now that you send a newsletter to?
I have a very small list. It's less than 100. So,
we find our 100 first fans, right?
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. I think, but those fans are probably pretty loyal. Do you find that are they commenting back? I mean, do you hear from any of your fans? I know you're on Goodreads. Do you feel like there's any communication back to you from fans?
There is, and I love any kind of communication I get back from fans. It's the best part of it.
Yeah. So let's see here. I loved a couple of your blog entries. I had to go through some of those. Those were really well done. And I love your newsletters. And like you said, you've been putting this story of Yeti. You're chipping that out like a chapter at a time in your newsletter?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love
that.
Or
really a scene at a time, yeah.
I love that strategy for your newsletter. I think that's great and such a gift to your readers, But also, well, I can't remember. You have a romance list and a fantasy list, don't you?
I do.
Email list. I think I get both, so I think they're muddling in my head a little bit. But I like both. I mean, you would never. I guess you're really trying, even though you don't separate out like here's my romance author website and here's my fantasy author. So you are like, everyone knows you've got these pen names going on, and they're kind of cross. I mean, I would think it would be, what am I trying to say? I think it's easy for a reader like me to be interested enough to go across both of your offerings, in fantasy and romance, and read both. Are you finding that, or do you have any?
I just split it up into pen names last summer. So prior to that, everything was under Katharine Sadler. So I've just split it because when I do go on social media, it's better to focus. Okay, I'm in the fantasy pen name. I'm going to focus on fantasy. Whereas when it's everything under one name, I found it to be much more difficult. So I do right now. I do still have a lot of readers who it's hard to tell which genre they prefer, just because they came in under Katharine Sadler before I split out into pen names.
Mm-hmm. So at some point, excuse my voice, are you hoping that they'll drift, or in your newsletter that you had sent to, in general, everybody, will you have like a thing where they can opt into fantasy newsletter or romance newsletter, or had you done that? Yeah, try and break out your list a little more segmented. I love your blog, though. The one blog that caught my eye was the Annie Oakley and Frank.
I love that.
I know, that was so cute. It was just a little love story. I love Jane Austen and the toast. That was really cute. And tell about the Jane Austen and the toast. Do you remember that blog that you wrote? And it was.
What was my main purpose in writing that? Because I remember this. I know the story behind it.
Yeah, I think that you were saying how nice it was that the only thing she had to do other than write all day was make toast for the family. I loved that. And I'm like, geez, I wish I could do that. But
Exactly.
You were talking about it in terms of, trying to find ways to make more writing time. So you had listed like that gave you more time to meditate, to say no, to set boundaries, and to not listen to the daily news. So talk about those strategies to help you get your writing time and focus your time more on writing.
For me, I really write best when my mind is clear. So if I'm trying to write, but I'm still upset over an argument I had with somebody or something in the news has upset me, I find it really, really difficult to focus on my story and write. And so meditation has been really great for that just getting in the practice of not really clearing your mind, but creating a space in your brain so you can push that stuff to the side and make writing front and center. Because I feel like, Jane Austen didn't write for a lot of years because there was so much going on in her life. And it was when she only had to make toast that she had that peace, that quiet space where she could write. And so it's just about creating that quiet space in our daily lives that are so hectic that you just can't get away from everything. Yeah. It's all in your face all the time.
Yeah, trying to get yourself into that, excuse me, my voice again, trying to get yourself into that creative flow. I think you're right. There are so many distractions that can get in the way of that. And so I really liked your strategies for doing that. I don't think I've ever had the patience to sit down and meditate, but I did try the Calm app recently, and that was okay. But
it's hard.
But I'm just laying down and listening. It's not like my brain is actually trying to do the meditation. I'm just listening to this voice. But yeah, I mean, has it taken you a while of practice to learn how to meditate and learn what meditation works for you, what kind, or how to do it yourself?
Right now, I'm still doing guided ones where they're talking you through it. But the first time I did it, I really felt like my predator-prey instincts were kicking in, like going back to that. I can't have my eyes closed. I can't sit perfectly still. My back hurt. It was just very uncomfortable. So
yeah,
it took a long time to get comfortable with it.
Mm-hmm. No, I like that idea of clearing your mind to make room for the creativity for sure. I thought it was interesting that you started out when we started at the beginning of this chat. I wanted to make sure that Allie was hearing this too. You had started with short stories, but you didn't find that was like something you were really good at. And I know the struggle of trying to write a short story last month. I mean, and I give Allie full kudos for trying to write a lot of short stories. But what is it about short stories? Like, you would think we're able to write these long things. Why can't we just pull one small scene out and write this darn short story? I mean, and essentially each scene in each chapter is a short story, just, an unfinished one, I suppose. But what is it in your estimation that prevents us from writing, or makes writing a short story so difficult?
I believe that writing a short story is an art. I think it's completely different from writing a novel. And I think that a lot of times you'll see the best short story writers might go out and try to write a novel and they struggle with that. So I think it's very difficult to switch between the two. It's creating a complete story in a very small space. You don't have that room to spread out and build the character. I find it very difficult. I think it's really an art, and absolutely, Allie, I give you complete props for doing that because it's impressive.
When you recently put out a prequel to your How to Lasso a Billionaire. So did you approach it trying not to think of it as a short story so you wouldn't get, your mind stopping you from...
It's a chapter that happens before the book started, is the way I think about it.
That's a great way of thinking about it. I love that. Well, this has been fantastic. And any more questions, Allie, about writing process or her editing or her marketing plans or anything of that nature? No? Morningstar, go ahead.
No, sorry, just clearing my throat.
Morningstar, thank you so much for joining us and for asking questions. And Kate, I'm just so thankful that you joined our group back in December, and it's been fun to get to know you along the way. And I enjoy the group. It's been fun to make author friends and to share this journey together and to encourage each other. And every time you jump in on the group and you share your insights from your practice and your work this past several years, I mean, it's just always, I feel like we're blessed to have your wisdom and your knowledge pouring down to us. So,
well, thank you both for starting the group. It's a fantastic group, and I've loved being a part of it. So, thank you.
Oh, I'm so excited, and I don't forget about me when you're ready to put out your 5th Catalpa Creek book, because I'm looking forward to seeing how that changed. And
okay.
All right.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Katharine Sadler, katharinesadler.com, for joining us this morning. And I hope y'all get to check her out and check out her books.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do a little outro here. Share your website one more time, and be sure to like and follow. Talk to you guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.